This episode of Wheat Pete's Word is brought to you by Syngenta. Stack the deck in your favor in 2025 with a stacked cereals lineup of crop protection products from Syngenta. With proven technology for exceptional disease control and greater plant resilience, you'll find game-changing solutions for your wheat crop. Visit syngenta.ca for more info.
Good day and welcome to Wheat Pete's Word here on Real Agriculture for Wednesday, April the 16th. On this episode of the Word, it's winter again. Oh my gosh, what happened to spring? Hey, several lessons I learned over the weekend that I think are really important. And then we have lots of agronomy answers. Paul should be excited as heck. We're going to talk nitrogen, sulfur, phosphorus, and manganese, and I need to get through it all. And with that, let's go! So to start off with, very cool, our own Sean Haney here at Real Agriculture is going to be one of the interviewers for the Agricultural Leaders Debate tomorrow evening. That's Thursday night, 17th of April, 5 p.m. It will be streaming on both the Canadian Federation of Agriculture website platforms and also Real Agriculture. If you can at all, I think we all need to listen as to what the different political parties are thinking about agriculture, and that is very, very cool. And yes, dang it, winter has returned. Snow on the 16th of April. Are you kidding me? How can that be? But that's where we're at. I really think Mother Nature is just kind of listening to our good friend Nature Nut Nick and must have thought back to say, well, we didn't give you any winter at all in 2024, and so 2025 we will make that up. We are well behind on growing degree day accumulations, and it's no big deal. We haven't lost anything. The one niggling thing at the back of Wheat Pete's brain, man, the Ag Canada forecast, the Environment Canada forecast is for very hot June, July, August. The wheat crop is behind in development, and if we get into grain fill and it's hot in June, bah humbug, that will not be good. But I am not trying to be a doomsday sayer. It's just what niggles in the back of my brain with the current weather patterns that we are having. All right, I want to move on, and I want some really important lessons that I think, and I had not thought of these things, so I think it's really good. We had the I Am Enough cabaret performance in Embro on Friday night and on Saturday. And so this was Sherry Garner's story. I've talked about it a bit, and it's around mental health and the stigma and the awareness of mental health. And just before the final performance, my good friend Kevin in Essex tweeted out that his son's friend had committed suicide. And talk about just so important to get the message out there. But the one thing that I never really realized is how we treat or look at mental disorders versus other diseases, and what drove this home. And I really want you to think about this. You are not your mental illness or disorder. And the way that was brought just crystal clear is if cancer is a disease, right? If I have cancer, I do not say, I am cancer. I say, I have cancer. But if I have a mental disorder, for example, if I'm manic depressive or if I'm bipolar, see what I said? I said, I am bipolar. No, your disease does not define you. Your disorder does not define you. You have a manic depressive disorder. You are not manic depressive. It's a really important distinction, and I think that's part of the whole thought process to remove the stigma. And so think about that. It's just quite important. The other really cool thing I learned at that event, because I always have asked the question, all right, so you think someone is struggling, you want to help, and most of the time, and this is why Wheat Pete's 15 is so critical, because if someone is struggling, they often won't reach out. It's rare that they will make that call. So you need to call them. So do the Wheat Peats 15. But if someone says they're not doing well, how do you help? How do you try to get that? Because oftentimes people will not admit. And how do you make that connection? And so the acronym is LEAP. And I really like this. And I think it works for a lot of things. I think it can work as well for when we're talking to people who think GMOs are bad or things like that. But LEAP stands for listen, empathize, agree, and partner. So if you listen to what the person says, if you empathize with their situation, if you agree that it's a problem, it's a concern, it needs to be done, something needs to be done, and you partner with them to make that change, that is a really powerful, powerful thought process. And so a couple of things, how we talk about mental disorders matters, and how we can engage is the LEAP principle. Very cool stuff. All right, just before I move on, Lauren, my good friend Lauren is a Newfield scholar. She's currently in Australia. If you know Lauren, you may be following. She's sending an occasional update as she does her studies for that Newfield scholarship. And it's just so cool. She's in Australia, and I'm so envious, Lauren. Oh my gosh. But her last update talked about the public-private sector and how they work together or don't always work together. And she mentioned this publish or perish mentality that we have in the public sector. Like poor people like Dr. Dave at Ridgetown campus, if he doesn't publish papers, man, he's just looked on badly by the academic system, by the university system. And what that pushes people to do is to publish poor results. And that's all bad. We just have to get back to quality publications versus quantity of publications. Timothy Caulfield talked about this in his book, The Certainty Illusion, and it's so critical. Leo sent me some data, and I may have talked about this before, but sent me some data, and I looked at it, and it was from a journal. I never really thought about that. I just Googled the journal, and it said, known for rapid publication of new results. Whoa, stop right there, because no good, solid scientific journal rushes to publish new results. You have to have them peer-reviewed, you have to have them checked out, you have to have them validated, and so it's just a really good discussion around check your sources and look at these junk journals, because man, sometimes that science, well, too often actually now, that science is not good science. And last but on that is we have to get back to asking our public researchers for quality research, not for quantity of research. And that is a critical shift that we need to make as we move forward into the next government. All right, I'm going to move on because that's enough. Pete is not into politics, baby, but Pete is definitely into science. Hey, lots of questions coming in as some growers got some nitrogen, some sulfur on their wheat. Thankfully, I don't think anybody put it all on, but we were pushing early. I think that was the right choice, but now growers are saying, hey, Pete, what about nitrogen loss? Man, I've got a little bit of nitrogen out there. Some growers, maybe 40 at the very top, 50 pounds. Have I lost any nitrogen? Okay, let's think about this 2 ways. One is volatilization. No, we haven't had volatilization. We have lots of moisture, so it's moved into the soil surface. We're not worried about that. The other is through denitrification. Oh, you can get leaching on really sandy soils, but man, on any decent soil, leaching in the spring's not an issue at all. The issue is denitrification. If you applied 28%, and I don't think there was much 28% put out until just recently, a quarter of that nitrogen is nitrate and could be subject to denitrification. But here's the upside. denitrification really doesn't take off until soil temperatures hit about 12 degrees Celsius. We can get a little bit once it's over 5 Celsius, but we really need that 12 Celsius to drive things very quickly. A nice article out of Ohio State University that we'll link in the post that talks about this. At this point, nitrogen loss is just not a concern in our wheat fields. If it gets warm and wet, that's when we get nitrogen loss. When it's still snowing, I don't think we worry about nitrogen loss. By the way, Edwin, I gave a presentation for Edwin last Thursday, and I was trying to remember what I talked to that group about the year before, and Edwin came up at the end and he said, Pete, man, we forgot what you talked about last year. Like, just tell us what you want to tell us. Don't worry about it. Say it again. And so sometimes I think I talk about the same thing a lot on the word. I'm just going to follow Edwin's lead, and I'm just going to say it again. Hey, Jim out of New York State sending me a great email and saying, Pete, I heard you speak in New York State. I'm really trying to target my nitrogen rates better. I had some lodging last year. It was mainly due to the wheat variety I grew. I'm growing a much better wheat variety this year, and awesome, Jim, because the first place you start with lodging is with your genetics. So that's the right move. But then he says, I'm trying to figure out my nitrogen rate. Is there any nitrogen credit to growing wheat following soybeans? And the answer is a simple, not a chance. The vast majority of nitrogen research on wheat has been done when the wheat was planted following soybeans. So if there was a credit, we've already calculated that into our nitrogen response. Where you would get some differences if you grew wheat following grain corn, which fusarium is horrendous, but if you did that, then you would need more nitrogen because the corn stover would tie up any released nitrogen out of the soil. And we also know that if you grow wheat following peas seem to provide a lot of nitrogen to that next wheat crop, and so there is a nitrogen credit following peas. Interestingly enough, that nitrogen credit following peas does not apply to corn because corn needs its nitrogen too late, and it's all this timing of release. Anyway, Dwayne saying, hey, Peter, should I stabilize my anhydrous? Dwayne is from Saskatchewan, that I'm applying this spring. And no, the simple answer is no. Anhydrous will actually sterilize the soil where you inject it. Make sure you get good seal. The fact that it sterilizes means that the transition from ammonia, because that's what anhydrous is ammonia, to ammonium is slowed down, and it probably by 2 weeks. So that's like stabilizing it anyway, and it's in the soil. The chances for loss are just really, really slim. Different if you're putting it on in the fall. Then you've got this big time frame. Stabilizing anhydrous in the fall makes some sense. Stabilizing anhydrous in the spring probably is not worthwhile. Bob at Dashwood saying, all right, Pete, I'm going out today. I'm going to put on 32% and ammonium thiosulfate. It's going to -3 tonight. Should I do it, or will I get too much burn? Yeah, Bob, not a chance. Like, just go do it. Remember that we get burn mostly when we have really soft, succulent growth. Man, the wheat leaves out there in the field right now, they came through the winter. There's almost no new growth yet. They're going to be pretty tough. And even if you do get a little bit of burn, it is not going to cause any yield loss to speak of. No, just go do it. At this time of year, I'm not very worried about burn. We worry about burn a lot more once we get into the new growth that we have in that May time frame with that second nitrogen application. And to finish up with nitrogen, Alan saying, Pete, UAN, liquid nitrogen, is going to cost me $10 an acre more than dry. Plus, with the liquid, I can't put on any phosphorus, any potash, any magnesium. Does it make sense? Like, shouldn't I just go with dry? So, a few things, Alan. First off, if you're putting your ammonium thiosulfate with the UAN, the sulfur and ammonium thiosulfate is typically more expensive than dry as well, so you need to look at that price differential. It might make it more than $10, or maybe you factored that in. But as far as applying phosphorus, potash, or magnesium as a dry fertilizer on wheat in the spring, Man, the best you can hope there from our research is about a bushel, and you get a 2.5 bushel per acre yield increase with liquid nitrogen because it's perfectly uniform distribution and because it's more readily available. That nitrate component, that 25%, that's a little bit more prone to get denitrified if we get those conditions. It's also immediately available to the wheat crop. The wheat crop greens up faster, it gets going quicker, and that results in that 2.5 bushel gain. When you do 2.5 bushel difference between liquid and dry, I don't know. I think it gets pretty close to a wash. So it just whatever works in your system. But the $10 an acre more for the liquid does not scare me. John is sending me some pictures, and Jim as well, about some poor winter wheat. In John's case, it was snow mold. In Jim's, it didn't look like snow mold, but definitely between the tile, it was gone, whether it's excess water or whatever. And the question is about spring wheat. So yes, absolutely, you can plant spring wheat into that winter wheat. Where the winter wheat is good, you won't get any spring wheat. Where the winter wheat is thin, you'll get spring wheat. The challenge, of course, becomes that it's now feed wheat, and that's not necessarily bad. There's a pretty good market in Ontario for feed wheat. If you just do sections of the field, then you can combine the winter wheat separately. It'll be ready much before the spring wheat. The only downside is I would have liked to have done this on the frost back a while, but in this particular scenario, it's still definitely something you can do. If you can feed it yourself, you actually can seed barley into it. It's another option. But at this point, spring wheat, it works. Just know that it's feed. And that, in John's case at least, definitely allows you to get it tiled under good conditions this summer. And that's one of those considerations that comes into play. Ashley on that front, just saying, asking about seeding spring wheat following a winter wheat oat hay crop. So it was winter wheat last year, took the grain off, planted oats, took off a forage crop, going to spring wheat this year to underseed alfalfa, and wondering about tillage. And I fired back, Ashley, frost seed. This is a couple of weeks ago, frost seed. And Ashley had never heard about frost seeding. So there you go. As Edwin says, say it again, because not everybody's heard it yet. I'm going to move on. And Darren sending me some great tech sheets. And on the tech sheet, it talked about ammonium thiosulfate versus a liquid form of ammonium sulfate. And the tech sheet stated that the ammonium thiosulfate, half went back to elemental sulfur and therefore is not available to wheat or corn. Wrong. So the process, that transformation, some of it may go back to elemental of the ammonium thiosulfate. Remember, this is the big discussion, and it's really been a big discussion, and it seems to have confused a lot of people. At the end of the day, wheat needs sulfur early, corn needs sulfur late. With wheat, we know that anything that is just sulfate is 100% available. Thiosulfate has to go through a transformation. It's biologically driven. As John Lozon says, the particles, so particle size matters in this sulfur discussion. The particle size of ammonium thiosulfate is really small, so it should transform most of it to the sulfate form fairly quickly, but the data says that under cool soil conditions could take 4 weeks. And so when the tech sheet says that the ammonium thiosulfate sulfur is only 50% available for corn, that's wrong. It's 100% available for corn because it will all have transformed by the time the corn has a high sulfur demand. With wheat, it's kind of, we say it's 50% available, but in reality, it's just unclear how much will totally be available. And so you play that game. Most of the time, ammonium thiosulfate will work, but if you want to be sure, it is the ammonium sulfate because we know the sulfate's 100% available. Harry saying, Pete, ever since I went to using ammonium thiosulfate, I'm getting sulfur deficiency that I didn't have when I used ammonium sulfate. So Harry, I think that goes into that discussion. You're in Bruce County. It's cool soils. It transforms more slowly. But he asked a great question. I'm also, since I started using ammonium thiosulfate, I am stabilizing my nitrogen. do nitrogen stabilizers affect the transformation of thiosulfate to sulfate? And so, Harry, and you're going to do your own trials. That's awesome. I did do some digging back through the research. I asked some key players. It should not, the stabilizers that stabilize nitrogen work on enzymes. Those enzymes are not involved in the transformation from thiosulfate to sulfate, so that should not be part of the problem. Jim saying, Peter, I think you're not giving enough credit to elemental sulfur. If I spread it on alfalfa, a month later, that alfalfa, I can see exactly where I spread it. I can spread an S by hand and it'll show up a month later. Absolutely, Jim. Elemental sulfur, you give it some time and some heat, and you'll get some transformation. If you had have spread that with a sulfate form, like calcium sulfate, which has no nitrogen, gypsum, you would have seen that S show up in days, not in a month. And that's the difference. And Tony sending me a text saying, Pete, I've listened to the April 2nd episode so many times. Ammonium thiosulfate is my sulfur source on my winter wheat. What rate should I go at? And so, Tony, again, it's not a clear-cut answer, but with my own clients, we've moved to 7 gallons. With non-manured, we've moved to 7 gallons of thiosulfate. Some clients are going to 10 gallons. That's a lot of sulfur, a lot of expense, but because it's going to be a percentage of the ammonium thiosulfate that transforms, and because the sulfur demand is early and needed, we are pushing that ATS rate up. Okay, last I want to hit on manganese really quickly. I won't go through all of it. I'll miss the phosphorus because we can talk about that later. At the end of the day, Sebastian from Dungannon saying, Pete, I've got manganese deficiency in my wheat. My neighbor uses 3 pounds of manganese sulfate and he applies it. That's 1 pound of actual manganese. When I talk to my supplier, he's saying I need 6 pounds of manganese sulfate. What's the right answer? And so quickly, Sebastian, the official recommendation from OMAFA now that we worked on when I was also with the ministry, we would say you want to have 2 pounds of actual sulfur. So that's 6 to 7 pounds of manganese sulfate. You got to put it on with water volume. 20 gallons is a minimum, 30 is better. And you need a spreader sticker to make sure the manganese stays on the leaf, because it's got to stay in solution. There's a long discussion about how that works. But we would suggest you want to apply that 2 pounds of actual sulfur and 30 gallons of water with some kind of surfactant to stick it on the leaf. And that's what's going to give you your longest term impact in terms of fixing that manganese deficiency. Man, this is a long Wheat Pete's word with that. That's it. That's all on behalf of the team here at Real Agriculture. This is Wheat Pete with the word for Wednesday, April the 16th. Make it get warm and send me more messages. It's awesome. I love the messages. Keep them coming. I'll talk to you next week. Yet again, way too long. See you then.